So my topic is pornography. The title of my presentation is Porn or Art. But what I really wanted to know is what exactly around the world is, what the standard is, because in the United States it's a little bit hazy. And those that promote it would consider it art. They make it an art argument. It's an argument that it is art. Well, maybe. I'm not going to show you that particular aspect of it, but I just wanted to inform you, and I think we should know, since we deal with different cultures in this country, what it might be in each, not in each country, but in just selected areas. So you might be able to see around the world how pornography is legal in some places. In some places it's under some restriction, and in other places it's just totally illegal. And in some places we don't really have that understanding or defined. Pornography is a noun. It's obscene writings, drawings, photographs, or the like, especially those having little or no artistic merit. And the word is originally from the Greek pornographos, which means writing of harlots, or from porne, which means the harlot, and graphine, to write. So books, photographs, magazines, art, music designed to excite sexual impulses and considered by public authorities or public opinion as in violation of accepted standards of sexual morality. Basically, it's considered obscene. So the American courts have not yet settled on a satisfactory definition of what constitutes pornographic material. And there is a famous opinion in this Jacobellis, where Justice Carter Stewart's concurrence. Everybody, all of the Supreme Court justices were everywhere. And the concurrence holding that the Constitution protected all obscenity except hardcore pornography. That's basically the status. Then Stewart, the justice, wrote, "I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description, pornography, and perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it." And this is called the elephant test. It refers to situations in which an idea or thing is hard to describe, but instantly recognizable when you spot it. Some believe, for example, that any depiction of nudity is obscene. Others would argue that nudity itself is not obscene. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution prohibits the making of any law respecting the establishment of religion, impeding the free exercise of religion, abridging the freedom of speech, which applies here, the freedom of the press, infringing on that, or interfering with the right to peaceful assembly, prohibiting the petitioning of the government, all of that since 1791. That's one of the amendments, the First Amendment, which is a part of our Bill of Rights. So it's fundamental law in our country. Judaism has always had a positive attitude to sex. In fact, the Bible itself contains erotica, such as the Song of Songs. I was going to put some of that in there, but you can find it. It's very specific and very elaborate in its expression of the physical part of people. Jewish traditions of modesty and humility require Jewish women to dress modestly. Tradition frowns on Jewish women engaging in pornographic modeling or acting. And in the Halakha, the Jewish Torah or law, there are discussions on the prohibitions, thought, and gazing, which may impact on pornography. The issue is one of personal control over one's urges, which pornography takes away. And I want to insert here my personal experiences that one of my children was taken to some of those adult clubs when he became an adult. And he had some experience there where he kind of got frozen into that thought process, and he was so gracious as to tell me about it days later. He said, I can't get that out of my mind, and I constantly want to go back and think about that. And that was just one experience as an adult that he had to some acts that he saw in a club. And I thought, oh my goodness, and this is just, one experience. So we were able to talk through that, and basically I said, you have to use self-discipline. Self-discipline will take you where you need to go, will cleanse you of whatever thoughts that you don't want to have. So that was just my aside. Maybe that's why I have an interest in this topic, I don't know. So then the Roman Catholic Church, many Christians interpret Matthew 5, 27 to 28 to mean that since the purpose of pornography is to create lust, it is sinful because lusting is equivalent to adultery. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. That's what Matthew 5, 27 to 28 says. Pornography consists of, this is the a quote of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. That pornography consists of removing real or simulated sexual acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. It offends against the chastity because it perverts the conjugal act, the intimate giving of spouses to each other. It does grave injury to the dignity of its participants, the actors, the vendors, the public, since each one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profit for others. It immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world. It is a grave offense. Civil authorities should prevent the production and distribution of pornographic materials. That's in that section of the Catholic Church Catechism. Well, in Islam, pornography is directly opposed to the very heart of Islamic teachings, the taqwa, to gain a better self-control. The Sharia, Islamic law, and the ethical principles prohibit looking at the private parts of another person, and this applies equally to the pictures or films. The goal is to increase spiritual awareness and piety and prepare the soul to accept Allah or God. The Quran 24:30-31 says, tell the acknowledging men to lower their gaze and guard their private parts, for that is purer for them. And tell the believing women to lower their gaze and keep covered their private parts, and that they should not show off their beauty except what is apparent, and let them cast their shawls over their cleavage, and let them not show off their beauty except to their husbands. Pornography creates a state of tension that leads to the destruction of the soul, leading to sadness and depression and the loss of self-esteem. That is why in Islam, pornography is seen as a fundamental destructive force to eradicate from one's life and from society. In Iran, pornography is illegal. However, due to widespread internet access and a large-scale black market in Western films, pornography is called superfilm. In Iran, a law was passed in mid-2007 by Parliament. Producers of pornographic films face execution if found guilty. In the ancient Hindu philosophy, restricted promiscuity for men and women. The Kama means those activities which give us pleasure and satisfaction. Kama Sutra is a very ancient and sacred book about sex. This book has all those details and descriptions about sex types, sex positions, sex importance, and compatibility of partners and units, etc. Hinduism recognizes the role of sexual desires in human lives. There is a difference between nudity and expression of beauty and pornography. What appears in ancient Hinduism are the expressions of genuine beauty and not pornography. Modern Hinduism, illicit sex and lust is a sin. The holy book of the Hindus, the Gita, while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops an attachment to them. And from that attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises, and from anger, complete delusion arises, and from the delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into that material pool. I mean, we're talking base stuff here, you know. It's interesting how they go, the Gita goes from one to the other, to the other, to the other. That is what it says. So the Sikhism. Sikhs argue that pornographic books and films, prostitution and lust leads to adultery. Pornography is said to encourage lust, kam, which is a concept described as an unhealthy obsession for sex and sexual activity. Kam is classed as one of the 5 thieves' personality traits that are heavily discouraged for Sikhs, as they can build barriers against God in their lives. Pornography is not explicitly discouraged in Sikhism, however, only lustfulness is. In Sikh belief, pornography would only be tantamount to a sin if it becomes a flaw in one's spiritual nature. In Mexico, about the only important, not important, but the only point that I want to make there is that from the early in the 20th century, Mexico was known for producing a lot of films with full female nudity and softcore pornographic scenes. In Brazil, it is well known for gay and transsexual pornography. Depiction of sex with animals is legal. Magazine and DVD covers that depict genitalia must not be visible for public view. And pornography can only be sold to people over 18. In Argentina, it is emerging as another source for transsexual porn. So in Italy, the legislation on pornography states that it is illegal to distribute oral or video pornography to persons under the age of 18. Hardcore and softcore movies and magazines are available not only through sex shops, but also normal video stands, magazines, newspaper stands, and even some gas stations. All production and distribution of pornography in the country is forbidden per the Italian Penal Code. Felonies include obscene publications of shows, obscene activities and objects, and commerce of publications, images, or other objects offending public decency. In the 1980s, several courts in Italy enforced these laws. At present, however, the enforcement of such laws is virtually non-existent. Providing or exposing pornography to minors under the age of 18 still remains strictly forbidden. Other forbidden pornographic material includes child porn and snuff porn. So pornography in Japan is a large and intertwined business of adult entertainment with unique characteristics. Japanese pornography delves into a wide spectrum of heterosexual, homosexual, and transgender sexual acts in addition to unique fetishes. Starting with erotic stories and woodblock prints from before the 20th century, Japanese pornography evolved into a distinct subcategories with the media, video, magazine featuring live actors, manga, which is Japanese comics, which are very popular, and computer games, and anime, which is animated depictions of sexual activity. The manga and the anime at this point are extremely popular, even getting more popular with the youth here in the United States. By Japanese law, pornography must censor the genitals of the actors and actresses, and up until the mid-1990s, so was the depiction of pubic hair. Anuses are only censored at contact or penetration. Lolicon and its contribution to the controversy regarding the regulation of pornography depicting minors has been a major issue concerning free speech inside and outside of Japan. This is manga and anime. This is the Kama Sutra, and of course the Song of Songs in the Hebrew. I can honestly tell you from my personal experience in doing this research that it was not a very happy experience, and at some point I just kind of got a little bit, it was a little repulsive, so I stopped. And I just, got back on track with, okay, what am I going to say, what is important, and I wanted to share what I knew to be the case, what my research showed about this topic in other cultures and in other countries, because I think that's kind of, to me, that's what we need to understand. It's not just a question of the culture and the people, but the religion, about those cultures and those people.
At the Vatican, when you go to the Sistine Chapel, I mean, there's a lot of art there that is nudity. And at one time back then, there was a lot of controversy about whether it was art or nudity. And it started even that far back. The other one was on the Quran. It's the woman that has to cover, but not the men. The men are, they dress, they show their chest and all that, and they can go swimming with real bikini and all that. The women cannot.
The second point is a justice issue, which is very pertinent for this course in Catholic social justice, because Mario is pointing to the fact of how it is that, wait a minute, there seems to be, he didn't use the word injustice, I'll use the word injustice. There seems to be something interesting about this situation, which in some religions, it's interesting. I go to the gym and there are some women who are fully covered while exercising at the gym. Where does that come from? Deacon Angelita hinted in her presentation where it comes from is that in the religion of Islam, a woman's beauty is reserved for her husband. Interesting. Mario's point then is, wait a minute, is there something wrong with this? A woman's beauty is saved for the husband, but a husband's beauty is not saved for his wife? Follow me? So women's liberation theology, which is the 20th century theology, has come about to try to liberate women, right? To be able to show how it is that men and women we're all children of God, deserving of equal rights. So how it is that there shouldn't be second-class citizens, which is what we read various instances in the Scriptures. We know that Scripture is written in an androcentric world, where the ideal of St. Paul was that men and women should be equal, slaves and free, Jews and Greek. Was that the reality? We know that that's why Jesus was so radical, because Jesus treated that woman at the well as an equal. But were women equals? We know that they weren't. When we have in the letter to the Colossians how it is that women should cover their heads, going back to Mario's issue, why should women cover their heads? Men shouldn't.
The Constitution here in our country tries to be fair. That's why they kind of stay away from making that decision, because freedom is what is involved.
So freedom, the word that we're using is freedom. We'll also be using words later this evening like liberty, how it is that the church is very interested in liberating people. And so if anyone is being oppressed by whatever system, any system, like the system of women have to dress in a certain way, like wearing a burqa, wait a minute, who created these laws? Right? We can believe that they came from God, and or we can believe that these are laws that we can change ourselves. Because it seems that there are certain systems that oppress people. And if I tell my wife that she has to wear a burqa, but I can dress however I please, wait a minute, that's probably oppressing a certain group of people. For the sake of this course, so this course is a course in Catholic social justice, so we're focusing more on what it is that we in Catholics and Christians can learn from these. But thank you, Deacon Angelita. It's interesting seeing how it is that other cultures, if we were to take a look outside the Christian culture, how it is that we could see how it is that the Bhagavad Gita and Hinduism have something to say about various issues. Islam has something to say about different issues. Sikhism has something to say about different issues. Various world religions. For us as Christians, our Christianity is rooted in the ancient Jewish religion. We talked about that before. Deacon Angelita made the observation of how it was that the Bible contains a certain book called the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. It's a very beautiful book. We've translated a lot of the sexual nature of it out of the book, so that now it's pretty bland, right? Now we just have phrases like, let me kiss you with the wet kisses of my mouth, and it doesn't sound the same as it sounded in the original language, if you follow me. But in the original language, and Scripture scholars study this, it was a very provocative book. And why was that book so important? Because the same love that two lovers feel for one another, what the ancient author was trying to say is, just imagine for a moment that that's sort of God's love for you. God wants to be with you in the same way that that lover wants to be with his or her love. God chases after us in the same way that that lover is interested in being with that other person. Interesting, flash forward from the Jewish, we know that Jesus was a Jew. Jesus read a lot of those Jewish works. Jesus was a Jew. And when Jesus started preaching in the Gospel of Matthew, what is his first sermon called? We refer to it as the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5, we saw Deacon Angelita referring to that sermon. And what does Jesus say about things like this? Wait a minute, be careful with things like lust, because lust is a form of adultery. What is adultery and what is lusting for Jesus? Then it's wanting something that, wait a minute, we should be careful. It's not for us. So the Catholic Church has typically had this view on pornography where, wait a minute, don't be lusting after, desiring something that is not yours. One, because the Catholic Church always makes this distinction about what's natural or not. Remember back to natural law theory, right? What's natural is for two people to be together and to experience that. What's not natural is for a person to be with a magazine or a movie or an image and to feel the same things. So the Church has tended to focus on those, what's natural and what's not natural. For us as ministers and as family members, I think the great challenge comes from, Angelita telling that very personal story rings true with many of us in our own roles as parents, friends, spouses. How it is that it's very taboo to talk about these things. So how nice that we're able to actually talk about these things. But this is a taboo subject where a lot of people are not comfortable talking about these sorts of things with family members, friends, etc. And the strong pull they can have on them. What does that mean for us as ministers? The virtue of self-control is something that has its place in our history as a people. How do we control our passions? As human beings, we want pleasure, we try to avoid pain. Okay? When we sense something that gives us pleasure, those things may not always be healthy for us or may lead to habits, going back to Aristotle, they may lead to habits and our choices cause us to become a different person.
Well, I simply want to say that in terms of our internal social justice, when we as deacons or other people who are within our church in some position of knowledge or leadership, that we have that, I'm hoping that we work towards having a non-judgmental attitude even about pornography. We have our own personal limit, and as I mentioned, I in doing the research, I kind of reached, I was reaching that limit that I just was no longer wanting to do that. But everyone has their limit, but we still have that ability to share with whoever it is that's coming to talk to us about that particular issue. We have the ability to listen and to understand and have that love and enclose them and protect them to the extent that even though they may feel dirty or ugly or whatever when they're involved in this topic area in their life, we have, I think, a responsibility to maintain an openness or neutrality in understanding the fight that they have in their personal life.
The word that comes to mind for me is empathy. So I'm just going to use an analogy, and it may be a poor analogy, but maybe pornography, rather than stigmatizing a person and judging that person as so evil, maybe pornography is something that might be more like other, say, addictions or vices like smoking. A person who smokes, I could judge them really harshly. But what is smoking really? It's a person who tried a cigarette once, for whatever reason, and they got whatever feeling of pleasure from it. And so what happened? They found themselves looking for that feeling of pleasure again with another cigarette, and with another cigarette, until it became a habit. And of course, habits are hard to break, especially when your body and or your brain is telling you that you need something, right? The human body, the human person wants pleasure, wants to avoid pain. So when you find whatever it is that gives you pleasure, whether it's that cigarette, whether it's that drink of alcohol, whether it's that drug, whether it's that pornography, whatever it is, a person finds him or herself in that vicious circle, if you will. So for us as ministers, especially in the American Catholic Church, to look with the eyes of Jesus on those people, and rather than throwing the first stone at that person, to be able to say, you know what, I have a feeling that what you're experiencing is a very human thing. We as humans seek pleasure, whether that's smoking, alcohol, you name it. And so the question becomes, what do we do with that? Especially once our habits start to make us the people that we are.
Ex-President Jimmy Carter, when he was asked about lust, that he said, I believe he said, I have lust in my mind, but not in the heart. He said something like that. Stir up the whole country because he's such a strong person in the Baptist religion.
Which is probably good for us to raise that issue too, only because since we've been talking about morality and moral theology, it is human for us to think about certain things when our mind is not focusing on certain, when we're at work or something, we're usually focused on one thing, but when our mind is not focused on certain things, we tend to think about other things, and that's a very human experience. I cannot tell you the number of people who've come to me confessing that they've had impure thoughts, etc. Got news for you. Unless you can control those thoughts, it's not a sin. Follow me? So that for any of us who, I don't know about you, but I know I've confessed impure thoughts before in my young life, right? How it was that I had dirty thoughts. Wait a minute. That is human. Welcome to the human race. Glad that you had that. It means that you're human, right? So long as we recognize that, it's part of being human. Now, how we act on that is another thing.